All right, ready to dive in. Today we're tackling a topic that's both really exciting and kind of scary, Bitcoin, AI, and how they could completely change the world as we know it.
Yeah, it's this wild mix of technology and finance, but then you get into the philosophy of it all, too. It really makes you think.
Absolutely. So we checked out this article, right? It's a summary of a conversation with Eric Weiss, a tech investor who got into Bitcoin way back in 2013. He had some really interesting insights about the potential impact of all this.
Yeah, Weiss's perspective is super valuable because remember, back in 2013, Bitcoin was far from mainstream. He saw the potential early on.
Yeah, can you imagine buying Bitcoin when it was just 600 bucks a coin?
Yeah.
Talk about a missed opportunity, right? But it's more than just the money. What really struck me was how Vice saw Bitcoin as a direct response to some big problems with the systems we have now, especially when it comes to jobs and, well, who controls the economy?
Totally. Let's break that down a bit. So first, you've got AI automating jobs at a pace we've never seen before. And it's not just factory jobs like we saw in the past. This time, white-collar jobs are on the line too. Lawyers, accountants, even writers like us.
Okay, now you're making me nervous. But seriously, what makes this wave of automation different from what we've seen before?
Well, AI is amazing at things like analyzing data, recognizing patterns, even making decisions. Skills that we used to think were exclusive to us humans, especially in those white-collar jobs. In the past, new technologies have usually created new job opportunities as they replaced old ones. But with AI, it's not so clear if that'll be the case.
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what can we do? What skills should people be focusing on that AI can't replicate? At least not yet. We need to stay ahead of the game here.
Exactly. And this is where that whole idea of economic control comes in, which is where Bitcoin enters the picture. Vice saw it as a way to address what he saw as too much power in the hands of governments and central banks.
So back in 2013, Bitcoin was only around $600 a coin. What was it about Bitcoin that made him think this is the solution?
It all comes down to decentralization. Imagine a system where no single entity, not the government, not Wall Street, nobody has control over the currency. That's the potential of Bitcoin. It runs on something called a blockchain, which is basically a public record of every transaction that everyone can see. It's transparent and almost impossible to tamper with.
Okay, so instead of putting your trust in some central authority, you're putting your trust in this decentralized network, this blockchain. I'm starting to see why it's called digital gold. It has that similar feeling of being scarce and valuable.
It's a really powerful idea. And sure, Bitcoin has its challenges and risks, but that core concept, that decentralized system, that's what really captured the imaginations of early adopters like Eric Weiss.
It's amazing how a new technology can make us rethink our entire worldview, not just how we invest, but also how we organize ourselves as a society. So Bitcoin caught Eric Weiss's eye back then, but $600 to, well, whatever it is now, that's not exactly been a calm and steady climb, right?
Not even close. I mean, the article's really upfront about how volatile things were in those early days. Buying at $600, watching it go up, then crash down, then shoot up again even higher. It was a wild ride. And Vice was right there in the middle of it.
Makes my stomach churn just thinking about it. What did he learn from going through all that? Those early adopters were really in uncharted territory.
A big thing he took away from it was to really, really understand both sides of it. The potential upside, yeah, but also the very real risks, that downside. Seems obvious, but with something totally new like Bitcoin, those risks are hard to even wrap your head around.
Like trying to predict the weather in a hurricane. Right?
Exactly. And it's something we got to remember even now, even with all the buzz about Bitcoin going mainstream. Yeah, it seems more established, with big players like BlackRock getting in on it. But at its core, it's still the same. Every investment has its risks, and Bitcoin is no different.
Speaking of those big players, the article mentioned how institutional investors, the big money folks, they're starting to see Bitcoin differently now. It's gone from this fringe idea to something they're actually putting money into.
Yeah.
What changed?
Well, a few things happen. One, more people are starting to actually get the tech behind Bitcoin, the blockchain and all, and they see the potential there. Two, you've got this limited supply, only 21 million Bitcoins ever. That creates this scarcity, which is appealing, especially when the economy feels shaky. And then there's this growing feeling that, well, Bitcoin doesn't play by the same rules as the traditional financial systems, and frankly, trust in those systems, not exactly at an all-time high.
So it's deeper than just the tech itself. It's the whole philosophy behind it that really clicks with people who are, I don't know, maybe a little disillusioned with how things are.
Exactly. That's a key takeaway here. These disruptive things, Bitcoin, AI, we can't just talk tech specs. It's about The people involved, what motivates them, what scares them, that's what's driving things.
Like you were saying earlier, it's technology, finance, and philosophy, all tangled up together. But back to Eric Weiss for a sec. This wasn't just about making a bunch of money for him, was it? The article said Bitcoin made him question, well, pretty much everything.
It really did. For Weiss, Bitcoin was like this gateway, you know? It made him question things he'd always just accepted, not just money stuff, but like power structures, individual freedom, even what it means to trust something or someone.
Bitcoin made Eric Weiss question everything, huh? It's a pretty big claim. Did he, have some big life change after all this?
Well, he didn't drop everything and go live off the grid or anything, but you're touching on something important here. It's really about starting to question the systems we all just accept as how things are, you know? For Weiss, it started when he realized that, hey, the whole financial system, it's not some unchangeable force of nature. It's something we, humans, created. And if it's not working, well, maybe we need to rethink it.
So it's like you start with Bitcoin,
Mm.
and suddenly you're questioning, the very idea of money itself. But the article said he went even further, right? It affected how he saw politics and even healthcare.
Yeah, totally. Like he started questioning the role of government, you know? Especially when it came to controlling the money supply and maybe overstepping its boundaries. This got him thinking about ideas like individual sovereignty and how to spread power out more evenly, not just in finance, but in other parts of life too.
Like a domino effect, right? One question leads to another. You start by asking, what is money? And you end up thinking, how should our whole society work?
Exactly. It's about making those connections, seeing how seemingly unrelated systems actually influence each other. A good example is how Weiss saw these parallels between the lack of transparency in traditional finance and in healthcare. It got him interested in alternatives that put people more in control of their health data and treatment.
It's wild how a new technology like Bitcoin can spark those kinds of deep thoughts. But Bitcoin's not the only one shaking things up. We've talked about how AI could change the job market, but what about the ethical side of all this? The article touched on some pretty big concerns there, too.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. The same tech that could give us super personalized medicine or transform education could also be used for, mass surveillance or autonomous weapons. We got to be really careful here, make sure that how we develop AI and use it lines up with, our values as humans. We don't want to create something we can't control.
We definitely don't. It's about understanding the power of these technologies and taking responsibility for how we use them, right? This isn't a conversation we can ignore. Okay, but before we wrap up, let's bring it back down to earth a bit. We've talked about Bitcoin in this really philosophical way, but the article also compared it to more traditional investments like gold, real estate, even stocks. What's the takeaway for our listeners?
It's not about saying one is always better than the others, but understanding what makes each one unique, how they work differently. People compare Bitcoin to gold because it can protect against inflation, but it's also super easy to divide up and send around, much more so than gold. Real estate is a good long-term investment, but it can be hard to sell quickly, and you often have to deal with, being a landlord and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Stocks, they represent owning a little piece of a company, whereas Bitcoin, it's like owning a tiny piece of this decentralized network.
So it boils down to what your goals are, how much risk you're okay with, and how well you understand each option.
Exactly. And knowledge is key here. The more you understand these things, the better choices you can make.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today. AI, Bitcoin, jobs, philosophy, the whole shebang.
We've just scratched the surface, really. But hopefully we've piqued your interest and given you something to think about.
Because ultimately, the future isn't something that just happens to us, is it? It's something we build. It's the choices we make, the technologies we embrace, the conversations we have. As things like Bitcoin and AI keep evolving, it's up to all of us to really think critically about them and help shape the kind of future we want to see.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Keep asking those questions, stay informed, and stay engaged.